Hello and welcome to the Seahawkers podcast. I'm your host, Brandon Schultz, and I am joined by my good buddy, EJ Snyder of Bootleg Football. EJ was just at the 2024 NFL Combine. He's back home, though, and we're going to get into some of the things that you saw at the Combine, some of the information that you get just from being there. And, of course, we want to talk quarterbacks because over the weekend, we got to talk quarterbacks. And I know as a Bears fan, EJ, I know that quarterbacks are of particular interest to you. And, they could be of interest to Seahawks fans, too. Also, want to talk some linebackers. So getting into it all before we get started, EJ, how you doing?
I'm recovering. Combine is a marathon. It is a sprinting marathon. That's the best way to put it together. It takes a lot out of you. It's super fun. We'll talk about that. We'll get into it. But yes, I do not feel tip top. Let's put it that way. It's a busy time of year, and it is nice to be home. Nice to be sleeping in your own bed and showering in your own shower and all that stuff. But they're very long days, and we'll talk about why.
Well, and not only is it a long day while you're there, but then I feel that, even just for me, and I didn't attend, but I'm thinking, okay, we just had 4 days of information that was all packed into a tight spot, and now we have all this information now, EJ.
Yes, we do. We have a lot of information. Some of it matters, a lot of it doesn't. But the thing that I learned going to the Combine, because this was the first time I've watched the Combine, just like everybody, for well more than a decade at this point, and people were universally surprised that I had not been to one. And honestly, about 3 years ago, we started leaning towards we should go, and we just kind of put it off, and we didn't really think it was the right time. This year, we didn't have that choice. By about October, everybody that we were talking to was like, "You're going to Indy, right?" And we're like, okay, we got to go. People were really surprised I hadn't been there. The most surprising thing I learned about the Combine is that it's really two events, and they are distinct. And I got there pretty early. I got there Monday afternoon, Monday evening, local time. And I had asked around, and for all the people I was interested in meeting, they said, yeah, I'm going to be there like Tuesday to Thursday, or I'm going to be there Monday to Thursday, or I'm going to be there Tuesday to Friday. And I was like, don't the drills don't even start till like Thursday, right? And everybody's like, yeah, we're not really staying for the drills, because for the most part, unless you have something very miraculous happen, which we did, you're watching them, on TV, and the view's fine from at home. That's the view that I'm used to. But the first part of the Combine, that full week, I was like, what's this really like? And it is very different. It is the off the field section of the Combine, and everybody in the league is in Indianapolis, and anybody that has anything to do with the league is in Indianapolis. That includes agents, coaches, employed and otherwise, coaches looking for work, coaches who already have work, scouts, media, trainers, company owners for communications, data, equipment, and everybody's everywhere all at once. Like when you go to breakfast, you see agents, you see trainers, you see guys that own gyms, you see Ron Rivera, you see media people, and they're all just having breakfast intermixed amongst the folks that live in Indianapolis, right? And that's like everywhere. It doesn't matter where you go in Indianapolis. The NFL takes over the city for the whole week, and it's highly social. Everybody talks to everybody. You end up in an elevator with a guy carrying a helmet and a pair of shoulder pads, and you're like, hey, what are you doing here? And he's like, I'm trying to sell these to, whatever, a team, the league. And so you have these conversations that are random all over the place, and days really start in the media center, which is in the convention center, which, by the way, is one of the largest buildings I've ever been in. The Indiana State Convention Center is massive. Like, there was all this stuff going on. Everything you see on TV, Radio Row, all the podiums, all the breakout rooms, the media workroom, which you never see, which had like 750 desks in it. It's just a massive room. There was a whole nother convention in the convention center at the same time. We never saw that.
Wow.
And it had, equally or more people. And they probably could have had 2 or 3 more conventions. That place is like staggeringly large. But days really start in the media center, Radio Row, and the podiums, which you've seen probably both if you've been paying attention to coverage. And It goes until probably 3-4 o'clock in the afternoon. Then people start to kind of break up. And if you're smart, I learned you take about 90 minutes and you go back to your hotel room and you take your shoes off and you get some water and you kick your feet up and answer some emails and just take a break, because there's a whole nother day that's going to start at about 6:30. And so I would take another shower, change clothes, whatever, and then you go out for dinner. And dinner is the same thing. You're texting people, meeting people, whatever. You go through dinner, and then it's the bar circuit starts. And the bar circuit is really important. A lot of people are like, I don't drink. You don't have to drink. That's not the point. There are several bars around Indianapolis that are just where people go. And if you ask around, it's not hard to find out where those are. And, you show up and you walk in, and again, it is who's who. It is coaches, assistant coaches. I met assistant coaches for the Bears. I met quality control people for CFL teams. I met personnel GMs for college teams. I met recruiters. I met Austin Eckler's agents. It never stops.
They're all there.
Yeah. They're all there. And all you have to do is like go order a drink and see who's sitting where. I've done this for a while now, so I know a lot of people. And, you end up moving from table to table, saying hi, seeing what people are up to, talking. People ask you questions, opportunities come up. Hey, do you want to do this? Hey, have you thought about this? And it's random and it's very quick. And then one bar closes and you walk across town and you go to the other bar, and then you're there and you see a whole nother range of people and you stay there till it closes. And then, before you know it, it's 4 a.m. and it's like, okay, we got to do this all again tomorrow. And you walk home. Indianapolis is a great walking city, and you get 3 or 4 hours worth of sleep, and you get up and you answer your emails and you take a shower and you find some coffee and you do a phone interview, and then you get back to the convention center and you start doing it again. And that is the first 4 days before the drills start. And then the drills start, and the drills, people are pretty familiar with the drills, right? Yeah. You got interviews and players and now they have fans in Lucas Oil, which is a great stadium, by the way. My first time in Lucas Oil, really enjoyed it. And then the show starts, right? That's the circus. It's NFL.com and it's the Times, and that's all cool. I was there for, a day and a half of that, and then I flew home and watched the rest of it here on TV. But it really is these two distinct different sections, and the rumor mill really cranks up in the first half, and then, it just keeps going through the second half. But then you get all the player information that, you see on the combine broadcast. People hurt and people out.
When I brought up the idea of we have all this information, I was thinking of the second half, EJ, of your experience.
I too
I wasn't even thinking of the first half of your experience.
And I don't think that until you go, you do, because I didn't either. I was a little, this sounds so stupid in retrospect. Forgive me. I was a little worried that I was going to have downtime, that I was going to have big sections of time where, a meeting fell through or something, and I was just going to kind of be sitting around, I don't know, typing out tweets or watching film, or, there's always something to do in draft season. But I was like, oh, do I really need to fly all the way to Indianapolis for that? No. It is the complete opposite of that. From the moment you get up and can get your eyes open and get coffee in you and get moving, you're doing stuff, talking to people, and, things happen. You're walking through Radio Row and somebody, grabs you and goes, hey, can you sit down for 20 minutes and talk about, the linemen the Dolphins might take? And you're like, yeah, man, sure. No problem. I'll be right there. And you just bounce around all day. And then you kind of look down and you're like, oh, I haven't eaten anything. It's 4 o'clock. I should go back to the room, put my feet up, because then, you got to recharge, get ready, go out to dinner. And start all over again. And you have to sort of pick and choose. I'm certainly not as young as I used to be, and I can't do 4 a.m. every night. In fact, the second night I was there was the first time that I can remember in a good long time, because we live, on the West Coast, and most bars don't close at 4 a.m. They close at, depending on where you're at, midnight or 2. So normal time. I can't remember the last time I closed a bar. And I left Prime 47 a Tuesday on 3:45 in the morning. And I was like, okay, not going to be able to do this every night. So you kind of got to pick and choose. But it's really valuable real estate, because you just run into everybody and you get to talk to everybody, and it's free flowing conversation. Everybody's had a couple of drinks, and It's a really fun, social, enjoyable time, but you learn a lot at the same time. So
So now that you've learned a lot, have you learned any Seahawks related or maybe even Seahawks adjacent information?
Well, sure, I think, but I did get
I'm
to
good
meet.
with rumors. I don't
Yeah.
need truth and
Yeah, right,
facts,
you don't
EJ.
need
That we're talking.
substantiation. Well, I will say I did get to meet John Schneider, and I did not get any information from him, but
Ah,
I did shoot my shot. You would be proud of me, Brandon. I was
okay,
like,
good.
"We wanna come talk to Mike." And he was like, "What?" I was like, "I'm right by you. I'm like
Yeah.
15 miles from VMAC." He was like, "No catfish," because, John's a very honest and forthright person. I was like, Yeah, no catfish. I would be happy to. Like, let's do it." So who knows if that
Right.
pans out? And there's a million of those every hour at the combine, so some of them will pan out. But didn't get anything direct from John. Certainly talked to some folks that cover the team, and it's pretty interesting when you go to those sessions. John had his session the second day I was there. He was on my flight, actually. I saw him but didn't get a chance to talk to him on the flight.
Didn't get to
But
pass
then
my number to him once
I know
again.
I tried to airdrop him pictures, but I didn't. It didn't happen. So, but you can see who gathers around the podium, and it's a mix of national scouts and beat writers who are there to cover the team for sure.
Yeah.
And they don't miss those sessions when the coaches and GM speak. So you can see who's there, and you can kind of ask around. That's a free crowd. You can just sort of wander around, and the beat writers do get a little bonus, which is kind of cool. They get a little extra time, like it's almost like injury time added on, right? They leave the podium, they go down in the corner, and like only the beat writers can be there, which is kind of cool for folks that are dedicated to covering the team. And that was for most teams. That was really cool to see.
Yeah, because that was one of the things that stood out to me during Schneider's interview were just how many questions that he got about people adjacent to the team, whether it was Carolina with having
Yeah.
the GM there and the new coach with
Mhm.
had relations in Seattle, and then
Yep.
his relationships in Green Bay that have kind of and in Kansas City. So I mean, he's been in the league so long that he's now getting asked about all these different people by all these other reporters throughout the NFL.
Right, and what you see, that is like the the micro and the macro is Indianapolis, right? Because you
Right.
see two people who your brain doesn't necessarily put together because one works for San Francisco and one works for Tampa Bay, and you're like, "What in the and they hug each other, and you're like, "Oh, they were
Oh,
on the Washington staff together like 6 years ago." And that's everywhere. That's players who used to play for coaches, for coordinators, and, everybody moves, and, everybody's in town. And you see that like everywhere. And it's almost kind of a fun game to be like, what's the relationship? How do they know each other? Were they on a college staff together 12 years ago? Like, you just kind of play that little trivia game with yourself all the way through. The other game that you play, because you see so many people and there's so much information and it goes so fast, is you end up saying, "Was that?" Right? So you're in a group of people and somebody walks by you and you get like half a glance and you go, "Was that?" And somebody's like, "Yeah." And 9 times out of 10, it typically is the person you thought it was, whether it's
yeah.
a former player, coach, coordinator, whatever. So it's sort of nonstop. It's fascinating. You see the sort of free flow of information around the league, and how that happens. And then what I realized is like all the different layers, because I don't know that many agents. I know like 2 agents. Well, now I know 4. But before I went to Indy, I knew like 2 agents. So there's an entire bar full of like agents, and I don't know any of those people, but I know all the media people and I know a lot of the team people. Like, so like these are my people over here, but there's all these people over here, and I'm kind of like, who are they? And it's all the other people that company owners, agents, trainers. Like, I just don't interface with those circles, but there's just as many of them. They're all doing the same things because they work for each other, started businesses together, whatever. It's a fascinating event, start to finish, and you don't even sort of catch all of it. There's no way to catch all of it because there's just too much.
So when I say Seahawks related or Seahawks adjacent, like you didn't find out where Russ is going to be, like, or is he going back to Denver? Like he made it sound like Denver is still a possibility in one of his latest interviews.
Yeah, anything can happen. There's a lot of posturing. There's a lot of posturing coming into the week before the combine because everybody knows this is when everybody's going to be there. The offers are going to get made. The agents are going to hear them. They're going to take them back to their clients. They're, rinse, lather, repeat for every possible scenario. Russ may say that. I think that's probably due diligence and good business. Word on the street is no way is Russ going to be back in Denver. Like, zero chance. Not happening.
Right.
So
that makes sense.
Yeah.
But I do want to get into some of the performances too throughout the combine. And I know you probably weren't there for the quarterbacks, but we did get to watch those on Saturday. But you were there for the big heavies, on the defensive line, the linebackers. Clint and I ended up talking about the defensive line a little bit after Thursday, but we didn't get a chance to talk linebackers. And so I wanted to see if there was anybody in particular. Obviously, Jordan Brooks is up for a new deal for the Seahawks. Bobby Wagner, who knows what's going to happen with him. When you take into account Mike McDonald, former linebacker, a former linebackers coach, you got the defensive coordinator as a former linebackers coach. It feels like the Seahawks are going to need to be taking some linebackers, and so I'm kind of curious if you had some standout performances from that linebacker group.
Absolutely, and like I said, something miraculous happened. Somebody called me on Wednesday and said, "Come find me. I have a present for you." And I walked up, and out of the blue, they handed me a black vest, and I knew what that was.
That means you get to go down.
That is correct. So
Close.
You unfold it. It has the Shield logo on it. It says media. It has a number, just like the officials' numbers. My number was 120 for the combine, and that means field access. And we'd heard that we might get field access, but it was going to be behind the barriers. Turns out might have been a little bit of miscommunication. They didn't realize they were giving us the thermonuclear option. Black means you can go anywhere you want to and nobody messes with you. We didn't know that when we got there, but we pretty quickly figured it out that as long as we stayed out of the way of the cameras and the drills, we could get whatever we wanted to. And it was a program through the NFL trying to enable creators to have more access. Got extremely lucky to be able to have that. Had to give the vest back before you ask. I was not able to keep it. That was my first question: is can I keep it? Can I take it home? And they basically threatened us with penalty of death. They kind of gave us the Liam Neeson speech that they have a very particular set of skills, and if you keep the vest, they will find you. And they have a lot of resources, so I didn't try and mess with that. But it did mean that.
Well, they have your name and phone number, which usually you sign.
Well, they have your everything. Yeah, let me tell you. But it was a tremendous opportunity. Can't thank the league enough. And apparently we didn't do enough things wrong because they already said they want us back for next year, which is pretty cool. But was on the field right in amongst those guys. Had interviewed quite a few of them at Shrine Bowl. So there's always a little, so it was a little you don't want to mess people. It's the biggest job interview of their life. You don't want to but you're also rooting for your guys who, and you want them to have great performances. So there's a little sort of fist bump, way to go, nice run sort of thing. But you want to play it cool. You're down there on the field to get pictures. But yeah, it was right in the mix for all the linebacking stuff. And this linebacking class, especially the inside linebacking class, which is really the position you're talking about, has been sort of, I would say, much maligned. It is one of the weaker position groups in this draft, but I don't take that to mean it that I think it's weak.
And usually I feel like when people say a class or a group is weak, it means they don't have multiple guys that are in the top 15 or, in relation to where that position group generally goes.
I think you are absolutely correct. This linebacker class, to me, after doing the work on them, feels like that. The two that are definitely at the top for me are Peyton Wilson from NC State, who apparently has clean medicals. I haven't had a way to verify that, but most of the people I talked to, that was my first question because he's one of my favorite players in this draft. But the big questions was he's had multiple injuries. He's had both shoulders. He had a knee. He's had a serious injury history, but he is an amazing athlete. He is almost 6'4", 240 pounds, ran a 4.4 something, tackles, hits, great instincts, just a tremendous player. Apparently, All the MRIs came back clean. Everybody's pretty happy with him. Again, can't independently verify that. We don't get access to the medical information. But everybody that I talked to was like, it was the best case scenario for Peyton Wilson. Edgerrin Cooper's the other one. We got to talk to him at Shrine Bowl. He didn't play in the game, but he did come and do interviews. We got to do an interview with him for about 15 or 20 minutes. He's from Texas A&M. He is an explosive player, instinctual hitter, has range, can be all over the field. So those guys are really the top two in that class. Now, they may not go, like no linebackers might go in the first round. That is a possibility. We could see our first linebacker go off the board in the top of the second round, or even the middle of the second round. That would mean there's, good players available at spots where you can get them. The next tier of linebackers really features players who I think have top flight skills, but they're not complete packages, which is exactly what you were alluding to at the beginning of this. You can get guys that play roles and do things and can develop, and we see those guys every year in the draft. The two that I really like a little farther down the board are Cedric Gray from North Carolina. I think he is being overlooked. I think he will be drafted higher than he is currently being considered. I see his ranks, depending on what boards you look at, anywhere between the 160s up to about the 140s. I think he has a shot to go in the 120s or the 115s. I really think he's one of the better players in this draft. Jeremiah Trotter Jr. is actually going to go higher than that from Clemson. He's like the bridge player in this inside linebacker class. Really, what you think of Jeremiah Trotter Jr. sort of is a litmus test to what you think about this linebacker class. Because some people say, oh, there's three linebackers up the top, and they'll lump him in with Peyton Wilson and Coop. I joke that it's 2.5, right? I think Trotter is a very solid player. He is, I think, the last one you can probably consider like multi-role standalone. But then a little bit farther down, Cedric Gray, and then even farther down, Trevin Wallace, who is an explosive athlete from Kentucky. I really like him. He's not great in pass coverage, but he is, I describe him as very linebackery. He does lots of linebackery things, and I love linebackers. He loves to run and hit. He's an explosive tackler. He's a little bit on the shorter side, but he is stoutly built. Build is not a worry or a question or a red mark with him. Then you've got guys like Ulofoshio from UW, who is had one of the greatest, pass grades in zone coverage in the entire country. So great pass coverage linebacker, really fluid, not necessarily great against the run. It's not a stack and shed sort of traditional backer, but with the way the game's going, that's a very useful skill set. He's going to be available much, much later, probably in the 200s. So all that to say, I think there's some good depth. If you need starters, you're probably going to have to get them up high, but not the first round this year. And then there were 4 guys. There's always guys that have some performances that make me want to go back and look at them again. 4 guys from this year that I have to go back and do more work on. Leofau from Notre Dame. I tape graded him before I went, and he was, in my eyes, incredibly average. He was fine, but he was just fine. At the combine, he looked extremely athletic, really fluid, caught the ball well, moved through all the drills. And I said, man, what did I miss? Like, he didn't look like that on tape. So I need to go back and see if it was just off games that I picked, or if it's just one of those things where in shorts and a t-shirt, he looks amazing. Put pads on him, doesn't look great. Eichenberg from Ohio State looked better than I thought he did on tape on the combine field. Again, that just means go back and check again. Curtis Jacobs from Penn State, great athlete, but again, his tape is underwhelming. I just want to make sure, because boy, he can really run, but most of the guys from Penn State can. They're kind of a performance factory for the combine. And then Knight from UTEP is a guy that I've sort of gone up and down on. The very first time I saw him early in the fall, I was like, man, I'm putting him on my list. Then I did my formal study, did a couple games of him, and I was like, I don't like him as much in the combine. Sitting next to Brett, and Brett goes, man, I really like this Knight kid. And I was like, damn it, now I got to go back and look at him again, because he was moving very well during combine drills. And he kind of reminded me of like why I liked him back in the fall. And I was like, okay, why did you sour on him, or did you talk yourself out of him when you really shouldn't have? So those are 4 guys I'm going to go back and study in the linebacker class.
Are there particular drills that kind of dial you in a little bit more, that when you see a certain number that maybe jumps out more than another?
Drills more than the testing. Like I want to see good change of direction skills. I need some level of speed, but like most combine drills, they're more eliminators, right? If some guy comes out and runs a 4.8 or 4.85, like he's not an every down linebacker in the NFL. Just by definition, he's going to get smoked. The first time he gets on the field, offensive coordinator is going to draw a big red circle around him on the surface and go get that guy in pass coverage. Like isolate him with anybody because all of our guys are faster than him. So they're like eliminator thresholds. If they're, low 4.7s, mid 4.6s, definitely anything below that, they're fine. Like they have enough functional speed. I don't want them singled up on, slot coverage Tyreek Hill, but then again, I don't want most of my cornerbacks singled up on Tyreek Hill. So, it's not so much the agilities, but then I'm really looking at the drills. When they get up, they do the W drill, they go backwards and forwards, they catch the ball, out, break towards the sideline, follow the coach, catch ball, run towards like it's pick six. Like how does that happen as a package? Are his feet connected to his hips or his hips connected to his head? Like, does everything move the way it should, or does it look like he's just fighting it through the entire drill to change direction, to get up, to catch that ball? Does he have hands of stone? Like, and some guys do, like linebackers, they're not ball handlers for the most part, but some of them are very fluid and that's a plus for them. Some of them you go, yep, that's why he plays linebacker, not tight end. So it's more the whole package of, hey, do they meet the thresholds for basics? And then above that, how do they look when they're out there doing what they're going to do as linebackers, moving around, certainly lateral shuffle. Can they get up? Do they have, they have a little bit of vertical to their game? Can they get in the pass lanes, really mess things up? Are they incredibly quick off the break? Because that can, feed into pass rushing or blitzing. Any of those things that really sort of just catch your eye about, did I miss something on tape? Did that show up? Did I not see that? Did I think he didn't have that? Maybe he just wasn't asked to do it in his system. Things like that. So it's more like cross checks and just opening your eyes to certain guys that maybe, you watched a couple games and you just, nothing popped and you were like, and then, he goes and he runs and he jumps out of the gym and he looks super fluid and you're like, huh, how does this not translate to that? And sometimes it just doesn't. Right. But you can definitely tell guys who are multi-sport athletes. You can definitely tell the basketball players in the group, right? Shuffling your feet side to side and what would be zone pass coverage looks just like zone defense in basketball. It's an interesting athletic event, but it's you try to not pay attention to the noise overall and just kind of get to the thread and be like, all right, when he has to go out and do things in the National Football League, is he fast enough? Does he get it? And then tape's going to tell you the rest about eyes, intelligence, diagnosis, jumping plays, which has a lot to do with playing linebacker in the NFL. Really is. If you know it's going to happen before it happens because of alignment or assignment, good for you. You're going to look faster than your timed speed.
Well, there's things that kind of align to linebacker play. There's also things that align to the quarterbacks, and we get to see a variety of those things through the combine too. Combine performances for quarterbacks. I find it fascinating, for one, because I didn't really care that Drake May wasn't there or Caleb wasn't throwing, because those guys aren't going to be available to the Seahawks anyway. So I'm kind of looking at more of those next tier type guys, and JJ McCarthy and Michael Penix, and both those guys got the throw, Bo Nix, and not really knowing where those guys could go, but the Seahawks have a middle of the round pick. John Schneider's, again, he's talking up quarterbacks once again. It feels like a deep group too, especially when you watch some of these throws. And we saw some pretty wild throws, even just throughout the day on Saturday too, that maybe you try and not fall in love with a guy who, just is able to throw it out of the building. But, I guess the guy that I took away from Saturday the most intrigued by was JJ McCarthy.
He is a fascinating prospect in this draft and certainly within this quarterback group, because he is a great athlete. He was an incredibly high recruit coming into college. Obviously, he's a national champion in Michigan, but Michigan didn't ask him to do a lot as a quarterback. Now, when they did ask him to do things, high leverage situations, third downs, some longer down and distance stuff. When he did get the chance to throw, which was a lot less than some of the other quarterbacks, he was pretty accurate. He showed some good zip on the ball, which was not surprising. So there's just not as big a sample size, and you might have to go through 5 or 6 games to find 1 or 2 examples of whatever it is you're looking for. And that's it. That's all you get. So it makes him more of an enigma than a lot of guys that have maybe almost twice as many throws as he does. Certainly for particular distances, there are just some routes that Michigan doesn't throw.
Sure.
Like you're not going to see it. You can watch all of his 300 and whatever attempts, and you're literally not going to see it because it's just not a route they run. Apparently, really good kid. Not surprising that he's very strong in interviews. Interestingly enough, and this is going to be fun, I sat down with Matt Bowen, who has been on our show a couple times. It was my first chance to meet Matt in person. I've gone back and forth with Matt for years. He's been on the show a couple times. Great guy, Matt Bowen, former professional football player, current coach at IC Catholic in Chicago area. And we were talking again at the bar, and he said, well, I know JJ. And I said, oh, really? Like, how? And he said, well, he played in our league. He was right down the road. We played against him. And I was like, oh, so he's the defensive back coordinator, not surprisingly, because he was a safety when he was in the league. And so you're coaching against, an opposing quarterback. That gives you some familiarity. I was like, that's cool. And he goes, no, I ran quarterback camps with him for 3 summers.
Oh.
And I went, oh, know him. So Bowen knows McCarthy, and when he comes on the show, he's going to talk about that, because people are looking for that kind of detail on JJ McCarthy because the tape is slim in certain areas. Now, I thought McCarthy, I think he's a good player. He's going to be probably in my top 4. I don't have my final stack of quarterbacks, but I would say that's probably about where he's going to end up. He does have a really good arm. He was super sharp on a couple throws, and then there were other throws that he just missed consistently. And of course, like Rich Eisen, big Michigan supporter, he's on the broadcast, and they couldn't stop saying good things about McCarthy. And like the down the field throws, the go balls, he missed like all of them. It's not that he came up short.
He hit one. They replayed the one that he hit a couple times.
Yeah, but he missed like 3 out of 4. And they were still like, oh, look at that. It's amazing. I'm like, dude, he overthrew him by 2 yards. And look, the combine is a tough throwing environment. It is meant to showcase the quarterback skills, but these are not your receivers. You don't have rapport with these guys. This might be the first ball that you've ever thrown to that guy. It's a difficult situation.
You don't know the speed that they run down the field.
That's right. Yeah. You want to see quarterbacks excel. And it's not that he doesn't have the arm strength. He clearly has the arm strength. But there were shorter routes that he missed a lot. And then there were other ones that he absolutely drilled on time, right in the chest, with anticipation at the sideline. So it was kind of, in my mind, a very up and down performance, which is, equally frustrating. You're like, I was hoping he was going to be all bad or all great. And of course, you're not going to get that. So I think McCarthy's really interesting. I think people are going to continue to dig, and I think McCarthy is a really fascinating player because what you see in him is kind of what you see in the draft. Like, it's the eye of the beholder, right? You can look at McCarthy and say he doesn't have the experience, he's not great, or you can look at McCarthy and say that's a killer and he just never got turned loose, right? Yeah. It's more about the observer than it is about McCarthy, which is fascinating for a player. And quarterbacks are always interesting. I thought Penix had probably the best day throwing the ball.
Well, the best news that we got from Penix was that he came out with clean medicals.
Came out clear. He and Peyton Wilson were 2 guys that were really looking for clear medicals, and it sounds like they both got them, and that is probably the biggest thing that could happen for them in Indianapolis. Certainly the interviews are going to be big. It's nice to have a decent on-field performance, but again, they both have great tape. It was really the medicals for both those guys. And Penix, like, if you live, where we live, you've seen a lot of UW games. That guy can absolutely spin it from the pocket. Like, he can get that ball to turn over. He is a great deep ball thrower, has really good accuracy. Ball jumps off his hand. I thought he had the best day throwing. Again, this is an event made to showcase quarterback skills. But that's a good thing for him because, again, Bo Nix comes out, doesn't throw it that well, and he didn't throw it that well at the Senior Bowl either. And so those are 2 guys that get mentioned in the same breath all the time, Penix and Nix and Penix. Penix didn't throw great at the Senior Bowl necessarily, but he did throw really well at the combine. So that's a plus. I think they're both probably going to throw really well at their pro days, but I think there are more questions about Nix. Again, not from the tape. His tape is amazing. He had 61 collegiate starts. There's plenty of tape out there on Bo Nix if you want to see him. It's the sort of anti JJ McCarthy in terms of number of throws. But there have been now 2 opportunities for him to showcase his skills in this pre-draft process, which is extremely long and varied, and it hasn't gone super well for Nick. So a little bit of separation there when you're looking for guys that are sort of in that same plateau, and you go, hey, what differentiates these guys? You've already got your tape grade, and now you're just looking for the little stuff. And maybe Penix got a leg up on Nick's. We'll see.
So, and we haven't talked about potentially I mentioned Drake May, Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels is another one that I think is in that top group. Does it? I feel like this time of year, then like all of a sudden quarterbacks start to get elevated, and everybody's talking about, oh well, 5 guys are going to go in the top 15.
They're not
really good. That's what I mean. But does it, when it's this deep, does it? In some ways, you would think that would help in a way because there's so many quarterback needy teams. But in other ways, does it mean some guys are going to end up slipping?
Well, it's not slipping. I think teams have the option to wait, right? There is not that sort of line of demarcation of like, if we go below pick 15, we're just getting a backup, right? There are potential starters a little bit farther down the board and possibly, I think, will be available in the second round. The numbers are always fascinating to me as a studier of the draft, as a guy that pays attention to this kind of stuff. People are talking about 4 quarterbacks going in the first 4 picks. I don't believe that's going to happen because there is a certain inertia to this. Could we see 3 quarterbacks in the top 3 picks? We could. Then there's going to be a pause. Then there's going to be the 4th team on the board going, hey, are we going to sell this pick? And is somebody coming up for QB4 before any other player is off the board? Any edge?
A lot of talented people at other positions.
And that's what happens with quarterbacks is people always say this, 5 are going to go in the first round. 6 might go in the first round. No, 6 don't go in the first round. It's happened like once in history. 5 is very rare. The average is 3 point. I think
2021 was an anomaly.
Right. I think 3.4 is the average in the first round. So as soon as you get over 3, you're leaning towards, the weight of the thing. Could 4 go? I think 4 definitely go in the first round. 5, I'm not necessarily sure 5 are going in the first round for the same reason. Are you going to pick QB 5 over OT 3 or wide receiver 4 or 5 in this draft? And it's really going to depend on how people have the board stack. And they're going to be going, hey, we can still get quarterback 6, who might be Penix or that might be Nix, depends on how your board stack. Like, we're not out of options. So we can take our first round pick and get a player we need a little bit more, and that weight catches up. So I don't think we're going to see 4 in the first 4 picks. It's very unlikely. 3, I could definitely see it. It's a very talented quarterback class. Like you said, there's always a lot of quarterback need. It is possible that we could see 3 in the first 3 picks, but I don't even think that's a lock.
Well, we will see. And there's going to be a lot of talk between now and the NFL draft. We still have free agency to go through. That's going to obviously change some things going into draft season as well. And EJ, I want to thank you for coming on, sharing your combine experience and some of the knowledge you picked up while you were there. And always a good time having you on. If people want to check out your show, obviously Bootleg Football coming up. You guys going to have some combine coverage. What can people be looking for coming up on Bootleg Football?
We're going to be launching into our slate of guests here pretty quickly. That was a lot of why I went to the combine, was to meet up with those folks and start hammering out the schedule. It's always a bit of a challenge. Everybody's really busy this time of year. We've got some great guests coming on. Many of the same guests we had last year that people really enjoyed, like Matt Bowen and Jordan Reed, Emery Hunt. Just to name a few. We're going to have some new faces in the crowd, some high profile faces. Thing is, everybody wants to go last on draft coverage. Everybody wants as much time as possible to watch all the players. So like, can we go in can we go in April? Can we go at the end of March? And so everybody, all, 8 or 12 people we have lined up want to go in like 2 weeks. Obviously, we can't do that for content. So it's my job to kind of walk them down and say, hey, how can we get you to be comfortable enough to go a little bit earlier? So Bowen's going to come up a little bit earlier. I think Brandon Thorne for offensive line might come up a little bit earlier. Matt Harmon's going to be on the show this year talking about wide receivers. He's a new guest to the rotation. A couple other faces that people will definitely recognize who have not been on during draft coverage for us. So it's going to be a jam-packed season. We're going to start releasing our Shrine Bowl episodes this coming week. Those are the interviews with players like Edgerrin Cooper, who we got to meet when we were down in Dallas. We've got those prepping up with the editors right now. So we'll be releasing one of those a week and one podcast a week with this great lineup of guests and just rolling straight through until it's time to pick players.
Can't wait. Definitely going to be looking forward to it. Subscribe to Bootleg Football. EJ Snyder, of course, find him out on social media. Subscribe to their show. Subscribe to this show right there on the bottom of the screen, youtube.com/Seahawkers podcast. Getintheflock.com if you want to help support the show. EJ, always appreciate your support and coming on. And I think with that, there's only one thing left to say. Go Hawks.